capacity. So the role of a product manager at PostHog is to provide context to teams. It is not to decide what to build, determine the roadmap, or set deadlines, or protect people from customers, or some of the other phrases that appear for license to go. If I disagree with one of our developers, we'll build what the developer wants, not what I want to build. I kind of feel like good design comes from iteration regardless, and good design doesn't equate to being polished necessarily either. Like, good design just means like you do the best job of serving the customer. A product engineer decides what to build is the simplest way of putting it.
Hi everyone, welcome to Untrapping Product Teams, where we speak the naked truth about digital products. And today we have here James Hawkins. He's the co-CEO of PostHog. And apart from being the co-CEO of PostHog, he is probably the one who creates the most interesting jokes on LinkedIn.
I do my best. That's high praise indeed. There's not much competition.
Well, there are some people trying out after you. I even noticed some people copying some of your jokes already. They just don't credit you, but I noticed, so it's getting popular. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Good. So give me a little bit of context to people who don't know PostHog yet.
Yeah.
I think it was last week you posted that you reached a valuation of $920 million, which is very close to a unicorn.
Yep.
So,
But not quite.
Yeah,
There's a little bit more to go.
A little bit.
Yeah, so we're providing what we term kind of customer infrastructure. So really simply, we think there's like a whole bunch of SaaS tools out there that relate to customer data. As a result, teams have to like move data between all these tools to try and create a single customer view. We think it's kind of a messy approach, and we simply want to provide every single tool needed to build a perfect picture of your customer. We have a lot of products already for kind of product engineering, kind of growth sorts of use cases, but we have a lot more to do. Like, we've got the support stack, the sales stack, the marketing stack of tools still to work on, but we've been gradually coming at it from a more product-y related tool so far. But we have about 14 products today, 175,000 customers, something like that. And we just announced we just raised a Series D and stuff. So stuff's going really well at the moment.
Wow. So you must be doing something very well. And I'm very curious because I know that the way you work is very different from many companies. Let's start with the one thing. You don't hire software engineers, you hire product engineers. Yeah. That's what you call. What is the difference?
A product engineer decides what to build is the simplest way of putting it, as opposed to someone who follows a product requirements doc, for example. So really simplistically, that's the foundation of how our engineers work.
So engineers are empowered to decide what to build. Can they just start building without talking to anyone?
Yes, by design. We have our whole strategy. The way we think about products relates to is directly because of our product strategy itself. So I think my argument would generally be, I believe that your org, the design of, like, if you want to be a more product-led organization, which I would argue is kind of necessary nowadays, like this bar is so high in software because it's getting quicker to build. You know, everyone expects consumer quality software, whether you're doing accountancy or indeed you're building Flappy Bird or something. And so you really have to think through your org structure. But our org is structured to deliver a really wide product strategy. Like, we want to build 50 plus products in the future. And thus we thought through, like, how are we going to build that much stuff? And we're like, well, it's a constraint. Like, I can't manage the detail, and I don't think we want to try and manage the detail of 50 products. We need to figure out some other way of doing it. It's not for everyone, but this approach has worked really well to ship tons of products at the same time.
Wow, that's very different. So I also imagine engineers can decide what to build because probably you don't have a roadmap or something like this.
Yeah, so we have we have a list of things we would like to build that we call a roadmap, but they're in no particular order. They're not guaranteed, and there are no deadlines for when they're going to appear. We use it as a way of gauging demand. We'll put ideas up. It's very kind of loose, and make it public. It's the top of our homepage. There is some constraint, like engineers are in theory supposed to work on the product that they work for. So we have a small team for every product. The teams are multidisciplinary. So usually what that means is there's a mixture of front end and slightly back end leaning developers to pull off a given product, because most products have some products skew more back end, more infrastructure, or a bit more front endy. The group of engineers we have will reflect that. But we really want each small team to be able to ship without consensus needed from anyone else in the org, without any dependencies, ideally. There are a few places where there are dependencies between teams. Especially as we're getting a bit larger. There are some services that are platform-based, for example, but we really, really want these small teams to feel like, hey, it's like 3 people you can just show up and ship stuff in the same way. And it's come from looking at the initial inspiration. We're like, well, how are we going to be really productive? We basically win on like our ability to ship quickly, as do most startups. Who ships quickly with more than like 3 people working there? And we're like, oh, we did Y Combinator, which is this startup accelerator. And they have maybe like, when we did it in January 2020, they have maybe 250 startups in each batch. And the concept is you spend 3 months doing a Y Combinator batch, then you make as much progress on an idea as you can. And at the end, you go pitch to investors to see if you can fundraise to then grow into a mature company one day. And it is the most productive period, I would say, out of the, hopefully for like 99% of people there, it is the most productive period of their lives. It's kind of like you have to go to San Francisco, even if you live outside, you're encouraged to live with your co-founder. You just build. And we're like, well, okay, can we borrow some of the concepts there? It's 250 small teams. There's a team per product. There's complete autonomy. You can build a spaceship, or you can build a marshmallow factory, or do whatever you want. It's use your own brain to decide what to work on, rather than having to like convince other people of your ideas and stuff. And then you have group partners who are responsible for like 20 companies each or whatever, and they can pattern match because they've seen dozens or hundreds of startups going through. And so you can kind of apply lessons from each startup to each of the others to help steer people a little bit. And you can ignore their advice or you can follow it. And so we're like, well, that seems extremely productive per person. It's generally every team is 2 technical co-founders now. And we thought, well, we can structure ourselves a little bit like this. That was where the initial inspiration came from. There are also some companies that I would argue are doing this at more incredible scale, like AWS, I think is structured similarly-ish to this, probably with more process than I realized. But they also have this 2 pizza team concept. And they're doing, like, last number I looked at, they're doing $80 billion a year in revenue. So they're an extraordinary level of scale with this style of structure. And so I think there are proof points both at 2-person startup, Y Combinator size, and AWS size. And so that's sort of where a lot of the ideas came from.
Great. One thing I'm wondering, you said the teams are small, leaning towards backend, but have frontend. But so far you haven't mentioned the classic trio, product manager, product designer.
Yeah.
Do they have them?
Yes, but in a much lower ratio than perhaps is typical. So I'll split them out. So talking about product managers first. Product managers at PostHog are shallower but wider than in a conventional product management capacity. So the role of a product manager at PostHog is to provide context to teams. It is not to decide what to build, determine the roadmap, or set deadlines, or protect people from customers, or some of the other phrases that appear. The way that looks in practice, so a product manager will be attached to, I don't want to say responsible for, because they're not ultimately responsible for the products, but they're attached to around 3. At the moment, it's a 3-to-1 ratio of product to product manager. So you'll be responsible, like accountable. Oh, I'm using the wrong words. I need to find a better way of saying this. Attached to 3 products at once. Every month, every product over 100,000 a year in revenue gets a growth review, and the product manager runs this process. And basically, we have we look at, it's basically all the context we have. It'll usually, so for product analytics, which is one of our most mature products, I think we have something like 115 metrics. It looks at like usage, feature usage, revenue, like retention, growth. It'll also have in there like NPS scores sometimes. They're usually a little bit meaningless because the volume of data is pretty small for that. Also things like if customers have churned, they'll highlight, hey, here are 3 larger customers that we've lost for this given product. I've spoken to the sales team, I've looked through the CRM, I've dug into that individual customer's usage. This is what I think happened, which can be a really crucial moment for the engineers to just hear. The engineers may then go, cool, I'm just going to carry on as I was. Nothing has changed off the back of this. Or they might say, oh, like we should ship something to address why we seem to be churning customers, for example, or why people aren't adopting it because people cross-sell. And sometimes we might struggle to cross-sell one of our products. So to give you a really tangible example, we have the session replay product. This lets you watch video clips of your users using their product. And it's very, very popular, especially in startups where you're kind of too young to have meaningful metrics because you might have like 5 users and you just want to watch what they're doing instead of trying to draw graphs. It gives you more depth of understanding. It's usually a very horrifying experience. Even if you're a later stage, if you watch session recordings, watch 10 and you're going to feel like your product was built by a 5-year-old. Like they always will surface problems. Anyway, so our session replay product, as used by our customers, we realized every time a customer got past maybe $4,000 or $5,000 a month of spend, they would tend to freak out and churn. And our product manager dug into what was happening, and they were like, well, yeah, their bill just suddenly rockets. They have this lack of, like, what I can see from a sales context or from talking to some of them is like they just got a fright and they don't want to spend that much money on this product. They value it, but not to that kind of extent. And so the engineers heard this and they went, oh, we should build some billing controls in the activation flow. So at the point that you're setting up the product, you can set a whole load of limits. So you can say, hey, I don't want to spend more than X per month. I only want to track 10% of session recordings. I only want to track session recordings over 10 seconds long, for example. And these are all things that decrease revenue in theory, because they're capping how much people will spend, especially because we'll roll this out to our entire customer base, not just we won't treat new customers better than old customers as one of our principles, because we grow through word of mouth. Reputation really matters to us. But they were able just to ship that change, and it dropped our revenue because a bunch of people set controls, but then our growth rate was just faster, and now we're way back past it and growing more quickly, and because our retention's stronger and it's more important. But they were able to have that kind of decision just with the engineers listening to it, a product manager kind of giving them some pattern matching, like, oh yeah, we've actually did something similar in X other product, for example, and they made a change and it improved our growth dramatically. And it was the right thing for them to do, to discard what they were supposed to be working on according to their quarterly goals each team has, and just to listen to users and go ship that thing today. But yeah, that's a good example of like a more contentious interaction that went without me being spoken to, for example.
And it's very interesting because what I see is like the product managers are really close to the outcome created by the product. So you keep understanding what is helping the customer and so on, and what's happening in the market. And then you give context and engineers will do the magic.
Yeah.
So based on the context.
Yeah. And I think that I think a lot of people are frightened to give engineers this credit, but like inherently, I would argue no one's magic. I think a lot of people assume that engineers are unable to have the like customer side, and they assume you need like parental supervision from a product manager or from an executive or someone else. But the reality is, if you treat engineers the same way, like you treat a product manager internally like a grown-up, like they're sort of responsible for customers and your business being successful in a way that engineers often aren't. It's like, well, make it clear to engineers they're responsible, and just suddenly they engage their entire brain. And like, there's a reason that people are engineers. They're super smart. They're great problem solvers. They have very good depth on technology, and they'll often come up with things that no one else would have thought of, or ideas that seem. We have a lot of engineering-oriented users, and so they come up with ideas that I think are bad, that in fact are brilliant, and they are licensed to go. If I disagree with one of our developers, we'll build what the developer wants, not what I want to build. And they've proven me wrong many times. Like our whole company is only multi-product because one of our developers built our second product without having to ask. And so embracing a little bit of chaos. I think companies kind of over-index on, as a whole, I would argue a lot of companies over-index on predictability and control and under-index on innovation, basically. Like, I think if you have control everywhere, it's going to be harder. If the person, it sort of depends on the person who's in charge. Basically, if the person in charge is a genius, great. Like, go do what Steve Jobs says. He's probably right. I think for the vast majority of the world, that's just not the case. And so having a little bit of chaos at a lower level in the organization, where, well, again, I don't like language, but like an individual contributor level in the organization, does create true innovation, I think. And engineers are closer to the technology, you get them close to users, and so on. You do need to hire in a way that means that people are able to and want to work like this too. But yeah, I read a book on why, it's a book on why empires rose and fell historically, and it was talking about like 15th, 16th century Europe, and the book was making the point: how come in Europe around that time you have these tiny little countries that managed to sort of build huge kingdoms across the entire world? And it's the argument was, you have these tiny little nations next to each other. It's complete chaos. They're all fighting, causing someone to invent gunpowder, and now they have a fundamental advantage over the rest of the world, and they can dominate everywhere because they're 100 times more effective at fighting people. And I think technology is a little bit similar, where let the engineers create an incentive for engineers to innovate and see what happens, and just trust they will, and then you'll probably take over from companies that won't give them that level of trust, who are more conservative and slower moving as a result.
Yeah, I love this true empowerment, which is very rare to see. Like, I would say that 8 out of 10 companies I go and I help them work in a more fluid way. The very first thing I need to help them remove is called PM or PO approval step on the workflow. They have this, and then software engineers will have the quality gate there called product manager. And then I say, hey, you don't need to babysit any software engineer. You just need to give them context and empowerment.
Yeah, I think we have design works exactly the same way at PostHog too. So the biggest mistake we made with design as a company, at one point we went, oh, we should improve our quality design, our quality, because everything's getting, from a design point of view, because everything's getting a bit inconsistent, or there are lots of clunky bits of UX. And we hired a brilliant product designer. Like, he's really talented, like really, really thoughtful around what he was doing. But the workflow just didn't work for us at all. And so what was happening was engineers were then getting blocked in merging their work because the design wasn't at the standard that this person would have been happy with, which then meant that engineers were either trying to dodge the product design somehow or another, or it was creating friction internally, and it got rid of our ability to iterate. And we kind of realized the way we now approach design is we design things super far in the future. So we'll design something that's like wildly beyond the scope of the current feature, just to set kind of a guiding light for developers. And like, I'll spend time on that kind of design, going like, hey, how do we want PostHog to look in like a year and a half's time? It's very rough, as in we may not actually build that at all, but that is our current point of view on like, this is roughly the direction of travel we think we're going in, about how we could pull all our products together nicely. We'll share it with engineers, but it's just inspiration. Like, they can totally ignore it if they want to, or they can go build in that direction. They'll probably default to going roughly in that direction, but then halfway along you gather more information by doing stuff and by putting things in people's hands, then you change anyway. So it was better to iterate than to have to like go, hey, we're not going to ship it until it is perfect or close to perfect. And so, yeah, like, there's no design by default at all. So if I'm an engineer building a feature, if I'm comfortable without talking to a designer, I will just build it. If I'm uncomfortable, I can probably go get help internally. But like, we have the ratio is now a bit ridiculous. We have one product designer to maybe 75 engineers or something like that, which is like totally, it is a bit out of whack. And the product design we have is exceptionally hardworking. And he's very kind of, he really cares, which I think makes it harder to, like, it's made it hard for us to figure out if we would add people, what they would look like and stuff. But we're now hiring a couple more product designers. Or we will be, I'm sure, over the next couple of months as we're scaling very quickly. But yeah, it's very minimalist, the level of, when you remove micromanagement of the details, and you can kind of focus on the long-term vision and empowers engineers better. And the org runs much more efficiently as a result, which is why it seems so easy to like fundraise a lot, for example, because our metrics just look really good because everyone's building stuff, or like a very high percentage of the org are shipping product, which I'd argue is a very high leverage thing to do. It's sort of like, the better you are at product, the less need you have for marketing. Basically, like, sales is the tax you pay for bad marketing, and marketing is the tax you pay for bad product, I would argue. And so it's sort of like, well, if you can get the product in a state where people are willing to recommend it to each other all the time because it's good enough, there's something special about it. Everything else becomes very cheap to market or sell your product, because, you know, in my head I'm like, well, how can we do a good enough job on the product side of the business that marketing becomes easy or sales becomes easy? So like, for example, this year, we're like, oh, we want to grow, like, we want to see what happens, like, how do we go quicker? We'll ask ourselves. And it's like, well, I think the best marketing we could do is like ship more AI. We've got tons of AI ideas for how to improve using PostHog. I think the best marketing we can do is just ship a bunch of AI stuff. It's not to actually really do conventional marketing much more heavily. So anyway, I feel like I'm rambling. But as you can tell, yeah, I really strongly agree with you on that point. Like, I think if you, as soon as you have like, they should be involved at the start of the process, but not once you've got like internal approvals, you've given responsibility to the designer or the product manager. I think there are product strategies where that does make sense. Like, if you're absolutely winning on polish, 100% think that is the right structure. Although I've never built a company that runs like that. So I would guess from the outside. Like, I'm sure if you want to build like the next iPhone, which is a remarkably well-designed product, you have to have design really tightly controlling everything, because that's the one thing you're winning on. But we're winning on engineering velocity. And we kind of have faith. We also kind of feel like good design comes from iteration regardless. And good design doesn't equate to being polished necessarily either. Like, good design just means like you do the best job of serving the customer. And what they may want is not the shiniest experience or the most bug-free. For us, it's like they want tons of products in one. They want the complete customer picture, a whole bunch of other things as well.
This is a very different approach, and I like very much. It's clearly engineering driven, but it's engineering empowered by knowing what makes sense. So product set the context and design inspires. So what could it be in the future? And the engineers will say, okay, given all of this that I know, I'm going to build the best thing. Yeah. But then it comes strategy. And I think we could go into something that PostHog is quite unique. How do you ensure everyone is on track? Like, how do you communicate with people?
Yeah, so High trust is the first question. Trust. So we have the communication is kind of oriented for the developers here. It's not oriented for the exec team at all. So if I want to figure out what we're doing, I have to really dig to get back what's happening. It's much more like I will try to over communicate what we care about as a business overall, how we're doing, how we're performing, what we consider important, trends we're seeing, that sort of thing. We really try to remove the onus on any of the engineers to have to communicate back to us as like execs or stakeholders or to product managers or whoever else. It's very much like look in GitHub. You can find it there. There are no deadlines, which is one of the things. So there's a goal setting process, which is probably worth touching on. We set goals once a quarter. We very deliberately have not called them OKRs. We did initially, and we introduced a few things by default because they're just the way you feel like you're supposed to run a business. So we had OKRs, we had like performance management. We ditched performance management entirely. We have a whole interesting process around that now. OKRs we swapped out for just goals. So every quarter we get every team to step out of their day-to-day work and go, hey, like let's do kind of an equivalent to like a SWOT analysis. So we just go through like what's good, what's bad, what are we worried about, what are we not talking about enough, and we've got like a list of prompt questions that are designed to surface like unspoken things that are happening or issues or whatever, which tends to be really, I think it's a very healthy exercise. Like, hey, is the ship going towards the land that we want to land on at least? Once that's done, team will then take away, every single small team will run this. The exec team will run it. We'll share transparently what we think with everyone else as context for like, this is overall the direction of travel. Like, we're worried that we haven't made enough progress on AI, for example, or we're not growing fast enough. We want to grow quicker, or whatever the things might be. We're not polished enough, or we need to work on X, Y, Z thing at a very high level. That will get shared with everyone. And then every small team runs their own equivalent session. The exec team is 4 people too, so it's pretty small. Every small team works the same way as us. They'll all run their own little process. They will all design, hey, these are the goals we want to work towards over the next 3 months. That comes from the small teams themselves. There's no approval flow that's necessary or whatever. The team will just ship it. One of the execs will turn up to the planning session, give a point of view on things, but like not all the time. And quite often, like I'll turn up to the first half of the session where it's again context. It's like, how are we feeling? How's stuff going? Blah 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 blah. Quite often I'll just leave the session halfway through when the team then go, right, okay, what are we going to work on? Because I don't need to be involved at that point. Like I will blindly trust people. And if anything, I can hurt their performance because I'm a little bit more removed from their individual product and how it's doing. The quarter then starts going by, and there are no check-ins on how they're doing against goals. There are no deadlines either, and we don't hold anyone to account on hitting the goals that they set for themselves. The reason being that holding people to account, I think, is a way that people will try and introduce. I think the reason that exists is to introduce urgency or ownership or whatever, but we already have high ownership. And from an urgency perspective, I don't think it is. I think the skill with our style of business is to not need to introduce external urgency at all. It's to hire people that we believe are intrinsically motivated. Make that really clear. Like we're all remote. People aren't in an office. You're not going to have like me tapping on your shoulder looking at what you're working on. And so people need to be intrinsic. So it's kind of like, well, if we're already failing, if we need to introduce deadlines to get stuff done, it's also going to introduce technical debt. Because I think a lot of companies get into this sort of spiral where exec teams set deadlines based on something external they want to do, like achieve a milestone or whatever, that are ultimately arbitrary. And then what happens is, and I think it's because often you've ended up in a weak position where it's like, oh, we've sold something we don't have to a customer, or I've promised investors something I can't actually deliver on, or whatever it might be. And instead, the game I'm playing is like, well, how can I always stay in a strong position with like investors or customers? Well, with customers, it's like, well, we should just never offer deadlines. We're willing to lose business if someone demands certain deadlines for things that we don't have. And the same with investors, where it's like, hey, like we set revenue goals, we change, like we pretty much always hit them or overperform. Occasionally we'll screw up, but like we'll do things like we cut all our pricing one year, which obviously meant we like didn't hit numbers because we've just cut our pricing for a whole customer base, but we believe we grow quicker by doing it. And so we won't treat it as a like I don't know, a good analogy. Like this predictability, we just don't focus on heavily. As long as we're in like a really strong financial, you can get away with this if you have a strong financial position as a business and that you're not worried about dying because you're out of cash or you're making loads of losses or whatever. The way that spirals to our teams is I would just blindly trust people to go, hey, if they're halfway through the quarter and something comes up in a growth review, for example, or a new big customer has turned up that's like kind of unhappy with something, but they're already a customer and they want something that we would have built anyway, it's like, cool, just reprioritize, like more information because the quarter has progressed, and I will back you blindly to ship something different entirely. So we don't look back. We get the team to reflect at the start of each goal setting on like what their goals the last time were and if they got them done or not. But they'll often be like, oh yeah, we did this. These three didn't make sense anymore, and then we introduced these two other things. Overall, we're happy. Or actually, we just simply didn't get half them done. We were a bit slow, we were understaffed, or we've architected this thing badly and it's causing instability or whatever the thing might be. But yeah, we work on this sort of basis. It is very kind of it is a little bit more vibes based than using, because we do have to have performance management. Like some people will struggle to ship. Like we're 110 people now. The way we approach that again though is basically like, can we just see the input from the person? Like, is the person basically getting things done? If they are, great. And if they're not like wildly strongly going, like I'll back multiple decisions that I would disagree with. But if I'm like, oh, this person is perpetually wanting to go in a completely different direction to the rest of the company, then it feels like we're trying to build different businesses to each other. So, which has been exceptionally, maybe it's happened like once or something, but nearly all the time it's actually pretty easy to get people roughly on the same page with each other. And it's normally when we've had to let people go, it's been around just struggling to ship, which I think often is like, we're in an all remote environment. I think some people are well suited to this and some people struggle with it more and they need more extrinsic motivation. So usually the intrinsic thing is we interview heavily looking for signs that this person is happy building stuff in the zone, kind of uninterrupted. But yeah.
Wow. It reminds me of a few lessons that a lot of people know, but only a few put in practice. Jim Collins, first who, then where. Steve Jobs, you don't hire smart people to tell them what to do.
No.
So this is exactly what you're doing. You hire smart people, let them motivated to build stuff and so on, but it's the right people.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking at. And one thing, it's a bit obvious, but for those listening, I want to explore this a little bit. You said that you embrace chaos, the way you work and so on. So I am assuming that you don't have a defined structure, how teams work. You mentioned they define how they work. So they are not going to have something like Scrum or something else. I think they do however they want. Is it like that?
Not quite. So we do have a little bit here. This is basically so that there's some ability to know what's going on. We do sprint, so every team does. Every small team will work on I think 2 weekly sprint at the moment. So they'll go, hey, as a little group, they'll get together, decide what got done, what do we want to do over the next 2 weeks, and they'll use that to coordinate like, oh, so and so's on holiday, or there's a customer thing, or whatever. All of those sprint notes are made public, so all of the other teams can see what's happening. And I think we've experimented with, so every small team done that. That's been very consistent. Some small teams will choose to do stand-ups, some won't. Like quite a lot of them have chosen to stand up every other day in the morning, just to sort of check in. The teams that are arguably building something that is more badly defined do stand-ups a little bit more often in general, seems to be the way we are working. Because I think then you have slightly more question. There's slightly more uncertainty in what you're working on, so you kind of need to run it. So with the AI stuff we're doing, we're inventing a lot of things. And so it's sort of helpful to have the team talk it through a little bit every now and again, where you need more bandwidth. We have experimented, I don't think we really settled on the right way to do it. We have experimented with ways of challenging the sprint goals that are being set. So we've had like exec shop to them, and we've done them as a whole group before. We haven't really settled on something more specific. Yeah, it seems to be okay at the moment. At the moment, there's like, I think the team, this is varied by team. So some teams I think have a session where one of the execs will spend time with the team lead, going through like, hey, what's the plan? What's coming up for the next 2 weeks and so on. Some don't. So there's a bit of a mix there, but it's not like super tightly defined. There is the basics of structure there, which is kind of having the sprints at the same time across all the teams has been quite helpful, because sometimes it might be I'm on team X and then here's team Y, and this is one of those times where there is a dependency between the teams. It'll be like, oh, so and so from team X is just going to work with so and so from team Y on this thing for this given sprint, and to keep everyone's work roughly aligned. There might be like an infrastructure thing or a back end thing or something. So yeah, there is like a little bit of process here, but we're not like, I don't think it feels like super. I mean, I know some companies run like Scrum or Agile kind of very much by the book, and we're not. I wouldn't argue that we're to that extent working. It does feel quite loose or lightweight. I would say we have the basics of agile probably is how I define it. But I'm not huge on this stuff.
Yeah, the way you work clearly has principles of agility. So continuously choosing what is the best thing to do,
Yes,
adapting,
yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
on.
Yeah,
But what I see is like teams are flexible to adapt to what makes sense, but you have the minimum to have some focus and transparency on
yeah,
the 2 weeks and so on.
yeah, exactly. And it gives a format where it's mainly so that other teams do have a thing they can look at, so they can look up what is going on somewhere else. Because occasionally that is needed. The other thing we do that's useful here is we run a company all hands every Monday. The all hands is half context setting of like, here are new people that are joining into these teams, or here's the topic of the week, which might be a value thing. Like we might talk through like, this is how we think about communication internally, or this is how we fundraised, or the exec team have set some goals or something. The other half of it is people just show off what they worked on for the last week. And so there'll be a ton of demos that are very short, like 30 seconds each or a minute. Again, just gives everyone a rough idea of what else is going on in the org from a product perspective primarily. So then like marketing, sales, or other teams are like, oh, I can see this feature is being built. I need to think about launching it and sending an email to our user base, or making sure there's a product page on our website that reflects the new thing we're working on. Or another team might say, hey, I could reuse, like, those features you're building should be platform level features. I could reuse that thing in my thing. So we don't solve the same. If we have a similar problem across two products, we can solve it once rather than twice. And that is a very useful session. It's very visual, and it's a lot more compelling to watch a bunch of cool demos than it is to perhaps read through like 25 team sprint notes or whatever it is. That has been quite a useful piece for this too.
Every Monday, all hands, and with every single member, the 110 people.
Yeah. So not everyone demos. It's just if you did something cool. So it's probably an average of maybe like, it's getting a little bit unmanageable, but I kind of just want to keep it in principle. And now we have, it's probably like 12 demos per all hands or something like that. Like a minute or two each. And it does include people who are outside. It won't just be necessarily product engineering. It could be marketing, for example, or the website team, or whoever else. Although I do, they're kind of just doing engineering as well. So yeah, it's kind of, but it is a lot of fun, and I think it's a cultural point of ship. We're much bigger on iteration than planning stuff in advance. In a super detailed way, and so it's sort of I actually do it because one of our angel investors is a guy called Jason Warner, who is the CTO at GitHub, and he joined GitHub I think at a time where GitHub was struggling. They got a bit slow because they've grown an awful lot, and he was kind of brought in with the goal of help us ship quicker. And he said, this was the most important thing I think I did, is the all hands, we just got people to demo stuff, and it created a culture of like getting cool things out, because people want to show off the thing they worked on. He's like, that was probably the most important thing I actually did. So a little bit like how I don't know, I go on about the story, but that was kind of the reason why we introduced it and had the idea in the first place. But it's been really big. I think it's kind of a cornerstone of our culture now, so I really don't want to remove it.
I think I'm gonna steal this one.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure,
I promise it's good.
No, it looks really good because you get people to show what they have created frequently, and I think I just need to get a few showing, then the others will also want to.
Yeah,
don't want to feel left behind.
Yeah, and it's cool. It gives everyone a bit of context on what's going on as well. Like, there'll be a bunch of there'll be like infrastructure stuff in there, new features, and like our other teams sort of need it. Like, we don't, as part of not setting goals, we don't have like launch dates for products. So the engineers will just literally ship it, and then marketing are following engineering, and sales are also doing the same thing. So there's never like, oh, we're going to do a launch of this feature on this day. It's like, oh, this feature exists, it's in an early stage, and marketing have to get themselves ready to just launch it when it actually goes into production. So we won't have like the commercial teams don't become a blocker. Again, I think they can sometimes become a blocker. We tried to do a launch week because we see a lot of other cool dev tool companies doing this, and it just didn't work. Like, we're just like not set up for coordination like that. So everyone's getting super stressed, and like it just didn't fit well with our culture at all, or how our org works, and so we just stopped it, and now we just kind of continuously ship new stuff. We don't make an enormous splash with every new feature we build, but it has created a brand, I think, online of like, there's just new stuff coming out of PostHog all the time. And so it never feels like there's one day where there's some huge thing that happens. It's just like every week there's something cool to have a look at, and people really read like our changelog emails and things too.
Wow. And the way you speak, 110 people, execs sometimes give perspective. That's how you said, a point of view. It seems like it's quite flat, like the hierarchy.
Yeah, it's kind of there's the exec team, there's one little small team, and then every other team is horizontal. And so each person in the exec team is responsible for one of the small, not one of each small team is attached to an exec. We basically have two. My co-founder and I have both realized we're not particularly good at managing lots of people at once, and so we have like one or two things that we'll be focused on. Like I'm just focused on our AI products and marketing them at the moment. My co-founder's working on scalability as his primary thing. The other two execs we've got are more organized and more conscientious kind of people than us, I would argue. And they have maybe like so like Raquel she may has like 15 teams or something that connect to her in theory. Yeah, and she's kind of a sounding board for those teams. And so she'll do like one-on-ones sometimes with team leads, sometimes she won't. We've ditched one-on-ones by default for the whole org as well. So it's very distributed feeling, but we'll do them by exception. So for example, like, hey, this person has literally never managed people before. So we'll do like 6 weeks of this, or this team is brand new and we want to help clarify the direction a little bit. Like we're building a brand new product from scratch and we have a point of view on like what it should look like. So we'll do it, start off with, like I've got that situation happening at the moment with someone this evening. We want to build some new products for like LLM. We've built LLM observability, or we can do stack traces and stuff for people building with AI. But we're thinking about like offering eval or prompt management to product managers, perhaps as a product. And so I'm going to spend some time with him over the next few weeks trying to figure out together what we do, because it's just me and him. But yeah, that's style of structure. You can go very flat, I think, with the structure. I don't know at what stage we'll need to tier the teams. We have a couple of platform teams as well. That might change at some stage, but I can't. Currently, it seems to be working great, and it's pretty easy to change team structure around. So we'll just change it again if it stops working at some point or we have problems.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And to get to the end, like PostHog is growing a lot of this strategy of empowering teams to build things they believe. Like, where do you see PostHog in the next like 5 years?
Probably dramatically larger. Like we've started scaling the business halfway through last year, a lot faster. We hadn't really added, like we were 40 people until halfway through last year. And we kind of got to the point, I've never really worked anywhere that had strong product market fit before. So I think I was overly conservative with adding team members. And then halfway through last year, it was kind of just really obvious that everything was working. So we doubled from 40 to 80 last year. In 6 months, which is quick. It represents quadrupling annually. This year, I think we're doing something similar. In theory, we're supposed to get to like 264 people to build tons of new products. Because we're trying to build a CRM, a support platform, a messaging product, just like loads, like an auth product. There's like tons of bits and pieces that we want to work on, each of which is like a potentially like easily a unicorn by design. Like we want to build competitive products. And so, yeah, in 5 years, it's almost hard to imagine, I think, quite how much that we might have going on. We're also trying to automate everything. So I kind of, in 5 years, what I basically hope is we have every major piece of software that a software business needs to interact with their customers. And I hope that we've automated a ton of them through AI. I basically would see the world as like a marketing person configures marketing, and it's one person that configures how the machine works, basically, as opposed to like, I have a massive team of people doing marketing and so on. But yeah, I could see us being very, very large at that stage. Like, again, on social media, it's interesting seeing people's impact. They talk about the impact of AI. And like, oh, you have one person business that's doing 100 million run rate. My view is more, no, I think actually the opportunity we have is to scale just as aggressively as any software company would have scaled that's growing fast before. And we'll have 100 products instead, and we'll have thousands of people working here. So that's sort of what we're shooting for. And so we're in a good enough financial position, I think, to be able to pull that off. And we've had the growth, like we're tripling annually at the moment. And so we shall see. But it's very ambitious what we're trying to pull off. But I really hope, I think we'll have a lot more go-to-market people using PostHog than just we have like an awful lot of engineers. And we have some marketing people now using us. But I think we'll have expanded across more of the stakeholders inside of our customers. And we'll have more products and be more automated. I think that's roughly how it will feel. Or we screw up horribly at some stage. We'll find out.
Ambition. I like the ambition. And you're going to tackle a lot of products. Let's say there will be loads of competitors in different places.
Yeah, we like the competition. I think, again, it's sort of I think basically we're finding that I think a lot of software is getting a little bit commoditized by so quick to build things that there's just like 5 alternatives for everything imaginable almost on the internet. But there's also this opportunity right now to reinvent existing stacks of tools. And it's like, well, a CRM validates clearly that there is demand for this thing and it's useful. The challenge is distribution, essentially. And so for us, we've kind of realized, like, actually, we're better off shipping tools where there is competition, because they'll just be useful to our customer base too. And then we'll just get our existing customers to go, hey, like, that's another thing that relates to my customers. I should just have it in the same spot as the rest of my PostHog tools. For the same reason that, like, if we offer session replay and product analytics in the same place, the two together helps you build a better overall understanding of user behavior than just either tool in isolation. And I think with AI in particular, the more tools you add, if your customer is a painting, I'm trying to understand, if you just look at product analytics data or just session recordings or just errors or just revenue data or whatever else, it's like trying to understand a painting when you only have the ability to see the color blue. When you have all the tools together, I think the computer can better understand what is actually happening. The computer has more context to answer questions or to use tools automatically. It sort of is our hypothesis and what we're seeing as we're building in that direction. That's kind of why we feel like a very aggressive product strategy now makes a lot of sense, because there's just this opportunity in the market that we want to push for really hard. And it's sort of already been working building like this, and now it's just like, okay, let's just turn the dial up a little bit further on what's already working well. But yeah, we like the competition because it just means stuff is useful. Because I've built, like, before PostHog, we built 5 products, all of which flopped. And PostHog was the only one that had competition, and that one worked. And we're like, oh, we're actually not product geniuses, but we're quite good at getting lots of work done quickly and structuring the org this way and stuff. So we will do that, as opposed to like inventing the concept of like, if you said, hey, I would never invent a mug or a cup in the first place. But if you give me a cup, I go, hey, I can make a slightly cooler one that's got bright colors, or it's not more nicely designed. It's much more in my wheelhouse. So it sort of reflects, I think, my co-founder and I are not geniuses enough to be able to come up with a totally new category from scratch, but we can like redefine stuff that already exists much more in our wheelhouse of what we're good at. So yeah, that's kind of why we like competition. Because the fundamental problem really is, like, does anyone care, as opposed to, is there competition? Competition doesn't make a big difference. It's maybe like 1/10 of the importance of, like, fundamentally, does someone want your product? If someone does want your product, you'll be able to get some people to use it for sure, unless you have like unless you're terrible at marketing and sales, and we're not terrible. So yeah.
Awesome. And I can understand, because when I look from a product perspective, what happens, like, product people have too many products and you have to switch, or go here, go there, and so on. So you want to get an information. You may have been across 5 different tools to get to one thing. And if you have everything in one place, that will improve collaboration, decision making, and everything else. So I can understand.
Yeah, both for humans and computers now is a relevant question as well. So that's kind of why. But we're like, oh, we actually think there's a lot of product data, for example, in go-to-market tools. And there's a lot of go-to-market, like in your CRM, we'll have emails to and from customers who are frustrated or whatever. And likewise, there's a lot of go-to-market data in your product interviews and like how you're talking about shipping a feature that solves a scalability problem for a customer. And so we just think connecting all of this stuff up, rather than treating like product engineering as one island and like go-to-market as a different island internally. It's like, no, it is the same customer. So can we, and like there are tools that do this already. Like there's Snowflake, for example, the data warehouse, where you can get all your data in one thing. But even if you do that, it's like, great, you've centralized your data, but your business logic is still distributed everywhere. So like, oh, I change my email marketing software settings and I break a report in my dashboarding thing somewhere else, or whatever. And we kind of think, actually, if we just consolidate the business logic as well as the data, you'll end up with something that's a lot more powerful. As like the next iteration of how this should work. And then things like AI existing mean that you can build more stuff, basically, than would have been possible before. Whereas like 10 years ago, this would have been a nightmare. Like there wasn't the same range of, even before AI, that like open source software being available means that like we use ClickHouse as a database. Like if we would have had to have built our own database to cope with the events and all the data that comes into us, for example, which would have been a massive lift. And so we just wouldn't have the ability to use like abstracted tools and libraries and stuff. So we're in a really interesting time, I think, at the moment in software in general. And so I think either consolidation, I don't know what the other options are even, but I definitely think you do need something fairly dramatic to do well over the next few years with the changes that are happening in software development.
I agree. James, it has been a great lesson for me and for everybody watching. This is like how true empowerment looks like, and moving from coders to achievers, how to set context. I have always been saying like product managers should set the context, not control people, and you took even to the next level. So thanks a lot for all the insight and everything. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David. Really appreciate it.
So James, how people may find you if they want to connect and learn more about PostHog?
Probably social media is best. Oh, posthog.com or just on Twitter. I'm James.
Great. And for sure, if you want to have a good laugh every day or as often as James is going to log into LinkedIn and post something funny, just go there. It will be for sure interesting to start your day. Thanks a lot, everyone.